Welcome back to Recharge, real stories, real strategies, real estate. I am your host, Ashley Dane, and today we get to dive into a very important aspect of the housing market, where we talk about really the genesis of the real estate industry, new home construction. We are joined today with Bob Filka, CEO of the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Bob advocates for builders and developers across the state, and it really gives him an interesting perspective on new home trends, on challenges, and really opportunities. So, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you. Yeah. This is going to be a fascinating conversation for us.
Good to be with you, yes.
I always like to sort of start off with our guests and kind of get background on where they came from and how they came to be where they are. So from your side of things, can you share a little bit about your background and what originally drew you into this world?
Sure. My background is mostly around government. So I was a poli-sci major at Hope College, went to Washington, D.C. right out of college, worked for a congressman from Michigan, moved back once my family started to grow, moved back to Michigan to be closer to family. A lot of people do that.
It's a great place.
Yeah, went to work for the governor. Governor Engler back at the time was a policy advisor to him. Got appointed as the president of the Michigan Strategic Fund, which is the state's economic development fund. So economic development really became my area of focus. Actually stayed on and worked with Doug Rothwell and other leaders at the time to create what is now the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So I was part of the team that put that organization together. Then into the Grand Home Administration. I actually continued to work in that administration, but knew I should probably transition out. I had historically worked for Republicans, although I don't consider myself one anymore, but knew that I should probably be looking for a different position. Headhunter called me about a position with the home builders. I said, hey, I don't think I'm qualified for the position. I don't have a lot of background in home construction. I do have background in economic development. She said, this is a cakewalk. Go interview. And so it's one of those cases where, in fact, I taught my kids after this interview to say, relax. Job interview. I thought I would not get that job, right? So I was thinking I was just going to be practicing in an interview because I was going to be needing to find another position. Mm-hmm. So I was totally relaxed, and we hit it off. They wanted somebody new that looked at things differently, mm-hmm. and they hired me. And fast forward, I've been with the Home Builders Association for 20 years or so, and actually housing investments now. And the activity necessary to build the types of homes we need in our state, actually that economic development background has become very helpful, because what communities are needing to do now is to kind of consider housing investment like they would attracting a new Amazon store or a new manufacturing plant, and figure out how to put the resources together to ease the regulatory burden to bring that investment to their communities. Apply that to housing now, because whether they know it or not, communities are in competition for housing investment across the state.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. And with 2 decades of experience here, you've seen the breadth of all of the different markets, ups and downs and challenges that face not just the communities, but the builders and the broader economic impacts associated with all of it. It's really fascinating.
It's been an interesting ride. I mean, we've seen a lot of changes in the industry. What many people don't realize today is, why don't builders build more homes? There's a limited capacity. We lost 60,000 workers in our industry back during the crash of 08, 09. We've never recovered fully from that. And so people don't have that historical memory. And so they may question, why aren't builders building more affordable homes, for mm-hmm. example? And the reality is, with limited production capacity, your investment dollars are going to go where you're going to get the highest return on investment.
You cannot blame somebody for making that business decision.
Right. And so for the last 15 years, we've been predominantly building at the high end of the market. Mm-hmm. And as such, in the last 15 years or so, I mean, the price of the typical new home being built in Michigan has more than doubled. We're at The average last year was $475,000 was the average price of a newly built home in Michigan. The median is lower, but it's still $430,000.
Not what most people would consider affordable for the general population of Michigan.
If you think about it, only about 15% or so or less of Michigan's households can afford that.
Yeah.
And as that's continued to shrink, there has been a new focus towards more affordable homes to build. But then you get into the regulatory burdens and the cost burdens to try and build at that price point, and you do the math, and it's hard to get that return on investment point to compete with that higher end market.
Especially if there's the demand there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I am encouraged, though, in the last few years, there's been a lot of change. Michigan State Housing Development Authority and other local economic development groups have really started to recognize that they need to kind of apply those economic development principles to housing. And those communities that figure that out first are going to be in the strongest position for new housing investment across the state.
This sounds fantastic. To back us up just a little bit, for those of our audience that may not be familiar or know, what role does the HBA play in Michigan's housing market? What do you do?
Well, we're a trade association. There's an association for every industry in Lansing. So our primary job, though, is to advocate for housing policies, litigation that defends the attainability, affordability of housing. So that's our primary focus. So we get engaged in lobbying at the Capitol, obviously, lawsuits, many against local governments who perhaps are asking builders and developers to do things that are really unlawful.
Oh my gosh, there's stories behind that, I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, extortion is a word that's often used by my members,
Oh my gosh.
And unfortunately, and too often is the case, those local communities get away with it because they know they can. But we right now we're active in 5 lawsuits across the state on everything from local communities wanting to impose sprinkler requirements for their homes, to increase tap-in fees because they see a lot of new housing investment and they've jacked up their tap-in fees because they know that they can generate that additional revenue. So to codes. I mean, we've sued the state on code changes that would increase the cost of housing by $15,000, $20,000 for every new house. So we're there to fight. But we also, we have insurance programs. We have other things to make our members better business people, to reduce their costs like any other trade association would do for their industry.
Now, in sort of this very elemental way, the builders are the very beginning of the real estate cycle. When you're talking to policymakers, how do you describe the importance of what those in your association do for communities?
It's really about achieving the American dream in many ways, because we're starting to lose that capability for a lot of Americans. I mean, the first-time home buyer used to be in their 20s, then it was in their 30s. The average first-time home buyer today in Michigan is over 40 years old.
Yeah.
And so we talk about the wealth generation that's been lost for an entire generation. I bought my first house when I was 23.
Yep.
Bought several homes since, and every step
Equity
build a
is a
little more
beautiful
equity
thing.
and build wealth, right? And many people, when we first started putting the attention on more affordable, more attainable housing construction and asking government to get involved, a lot of people are like, home builders are small business generally organization, don't want government involved. Why are you asking government to get engaged? And it's really because the marketplace is dysfunctional, right? And there are issues at the local level. Many times communities don't even realize they might have old ordinances that are discouraging investment. They might have minimum lot sizes that really only enable a builder and developer to build those $750,000 homes, right? So,
and it's so amazing what an acceptable lot size may have been in 1975 versus what we would consider standard lot sizing now. And you don't see all the communities adjusting to modern housing density.
Yeah, and they may have ordinances that that require certain things that don't make sense for that community today. And it may take years. There may be I mean, the one thing that I will say, and what I think is one of the bigger issues today around the state, is the lack of predictability for the process to get a plan approved and to go through all the steps of plan review. I mean, the horror story I have, the worst one I've seen is from the time a builder over in Southeast Michigan, a developer, assembled all the property for a major development, went forward with their plan. From that point forward, it took 4 years to get that development approved. And the carrying costs of that, that big, huge swath of land isn't sitting there for free.
Taxes.
And so as a result, the reality is that cost gets incorporated into the math. And when they look at that development, initially, they may have wanted to build homes in the, say, $300,000 to $350,000 price range. Fast forward 4 years, they have to charge $500,000 or more in order to recover that carrying cost of that process. And I think we've got people's attention. And I mean, obviously, there are still communities that are NIMBYs, not in my backyard, kinds of communities. Clearly have a vision for the future of their communities and realize they can't stay stagnant, are changing their perspective. They're changing their ordinances and policies and zoning. And I'm encouraged by that. I'm optimistic about the state's future in the housing industry. Obviously, interest rates and some building material costs and stuff will continue to put pressure, kind of limiting that production activity. But I do think we've entered into a new phase where local governments do realize that they have to be a partner. And in the past, it was always viewed as an adversarial type of relationship. The big, bad, evil developer coming in trying to extract the best deal they can for their community, versus the city council members and stuff saying, well, if you're going to build here, you got to do A, B, and C. And that's flipped. And the local communities are realizing, what can we do to create this kind of project in our community?
That's so interesting. Now, from essentially a macro scale, what is the current state of new home building in Michigan right now?
Some people might be surprised that last year we actually had about 5% increase in production over 2024.
Okay.
So while national trends were going down below that, but we're stuck on about a 16,000 home number nationally, or not nationally, I'm sorry, statewide.
But still, that doesn't seem like enough.
It's not, because most economists would say in a state our size of 10 million people, just to keep up with the demographic changes, the movement of people within the state for different jobs, the aging housing stock, we should be building 25 to 30,000 homes a year in Michigan in order to keep up with that. And we haven't. And as a result, the average home in Michigan is well over 50 years old. And so that is a fundamental problem that we're stuck on, and it's a lot of it has to do with the capacity, right? We've got workforce issues, subcontractor issues. I mean, if you're up in the northern part of the state, Traverse City area is growing like crazy, but their biggest problem is getting subcontractors to come. A typical builder, builders are really logistical experts and managers. They're managing on average more than 22 subcontractors for every new home that's built. And so getting those subcontractors in line and having them staged so it's timely is a challenge. So it's more than a year. I mean, the typical home in Michigan, it takes more than a year to build. And that timeline has actually gotten worse, not better.
That's
in recent
incredible.
Times.
Now, we have offices and agents all the way from the UP down to the border and everywhere in between. In terms of regionality or regional differences, what are you seeing in the different areas of Michigan?
Yeah, actually, I just was talking to some folks up in the UP recently and looked at some of their numbers. What's interesting is the city and county of Marquette kind of fits the statewide numbers. The typical home being built last year up there was a $460,000 price range. with over 2,000 square feet on average. You look at the rest of the UP in the data, and their homes, new homes, single-family homes or townhomes or duplexes, the average price was less than $300,000. And so you do see that still there. There's still obviously a lot of strong demand and actually growing, and Marquette's growing like crazy.
Yeah.
Really wonderful city along Lake Superior. So there's that kind of is a microcosm of what I was talking about earlier in terms of that high-end demand and need. There's plenty of demand for that $460,000 and up home in the city of Marquette and the county of Marquette. So builders are building that, and at the same time, there's no one to build some of that other housing stock, although it's happening in some of the bedroom communities outside of Marquette. And we see that across the state. Problem is, to get to an affordable point for many workers, there was a study done up in the northwest part of the Lower Peninsula where the average commute time of those in the hospitality industry was almost an hour each way.
And an hour up there is 70 miles.
and to get to affordability. So workforce in the hospitality sector is hugely challenged. And really that, I will say, if you talk to any economic developer across the state, housing for workers is the biggest challenge to economic growth in our state today. It's the number one issue. Because if I'm a manufacturing company and I want to expand into Grand Rapids or wherever, the first question is, where are the people I'm going to hire and bring into the community going to live?
Yeah.
And if that's an hour away, or if you do kind of a map, a circular map to where you get to affordability for the wages that you're going to pay your employees, that commute time is getting bigger and bigger all across the state.
We want affordable housing. I think that's an ongoing conversation that I think if you look forward, there's a concern, just like you were saying, is there a lost generation of people that were not able to enter their homes at the ages that previous generations did? And what will that mean for them moving forward? But there's also economic realities of building those homes, as you've mentioned, the supply, workforce availability, policy. All of these things come together. We want to solve affordability. How do we do it?
Wow. There is no silver bullet. And I was just asked earlier this week, Senator Slotkin has introduced a bill at the federal level to put a freeze on any new code or regulatory requirements that raise the cost of housing, to increase production capacity of building materials within the United States. It's a great bill, but is it going to solve the problem in and of itself? No. There are layers of issues that impact housing affordability. Many people don't realize that getting utility service out to new developments, our higher production builders in the state will tell you that's their number one issue, preventing them from building more houses, is that the utility companies, given some of the dynamics and changes in their employee base, they've had a major retirements underway. It's taking months and months and months to get service out to a development. Just in a meeting this week with some senior executives from Consumers Energy, and one of our builders was saying they have a development with 90 homes. They've lost sales, and those that have purchased homes in that development can't move in yet because they still don't have power.
Wow.
I mean, and so many people don't realize that that's an issue, but it's a major one that nobody knows about, that slows things down, prevents more production from happening.
That's why we get to have these conversations, right? Add a little transparency to some of the challenges that are out there. And from the builder's perspective, Where are they at? Would they love to build more homes? Would they, or is there a certain amount of cautionary components here? We don't see a lot of spec homes coming out right now. Can understand it. They sell immediately. You don't necessarily need it. But what is the psyche of a builder right now in the market?
Well, I kind of separate kind of the custom home builder and the scattered site builder from the higher production builder. The one trend we have seen in our state, which is a major change, because historically Michigan's had a building community that was made up of smaller builders all over the state, but a higher number of homes are being built by fewer and fewer builders. The top 12 builders in our state build almost half the homes in the state. 12 companies.
They're the ones that have figured out the
and it's really because building and development has become so complex that you have to have the economies of scale to be able to withstand all those costs and layers of activity. If you think about it, some of the safety rules, fall safety protection, smaller builders and stuff, to have to purchase or lease the equipment necessary to comply obviously impacts that smaller business person more than the larger one who can spread that cost over their entire operation. Plus the aging demographics of our industry. So the trend is going to continue in that direction. Fewer and fewer builders are going to build more and more of the homes. The psyche is relatively good right now for the non-production builders. Most of them have been extremely busy.
Yeah.
Lots of cash deals. I mean, if it weren't for empty nesters, maybe moving back to Michigan, building that retirement home, the industry would probably, be hurting far more if it was simply going to be based on those who finance. Really, that has propped up our industry in a dramatic way. I think the psyche is, the industry's been through so much in the last 15 to 20 years that those that are still in it are survivors, and they pivot. And as we were talking, as I came in this morning, the remodeling sector is really kicked up because people are stuck in their homes and they have equity in their homes, and they said, well, I might as well improve my existing home because might be a while before I can buy a new home.
Yeah, it might be a while before they can get their sub 4% interest rate.
So people are pivoting and getting, we see this pivot of the smaller guys pivoting more back into remodeling activity to stay busy, and they are, because there's a huge demand in the remodeling side of things.
Well, and I think you see that when you don't have the affordable first-time home, they're going to have to buy homes that are aging 100 years old or more, and they need to have an update. I think we were having conversations of, buyers that recently bought in the fall coming forward and they're first getting their heating bills, and the awakening that
they need to do some insulation and some change those windows out.
And they need to contact a few of your members and get the
But the problem then
modernized.
is we have 16 HBAs across the state, and a lot of the consumer calls we get are, where can I find an electrician? Where can I find, people are telling me I have to wait 6 months or a year. I mean, that is, so if you're listeners and are, looking at renovation and remodeling activity, you got to get your name on a list, and you need to think well in advance to get that thing started, because it's going to take a while before you can get somebody who's a quality craftsman and a great remodeler to do your work.
Now, speaking of that, in the world of needing more quality craftsmen, I think we heard a lot of that during the COVID world, and there was a push to get more people into the trades. What is the outcome of that effort? Are we seeing the reward of more people entering?
We are seeing more younger people get into the industry. That's very, very encouraging. CTE programs at the high school level are full. The problem that we see, though, is there's just the numbers don't get us there. When you look at the aging population of our industry, we're just kind of treading water.
Okay.
We have historically relied on a lot of immigrant labor, not so much in Michigan versus some other states, but even in Michigan, depending where you are in Michigan. And that workforce has shrunk because of our current situation in the country. on immigration policy. And so I remain concerned about workforce long term. It goes back to that production capacity issue for our state. We need to have a more coherent and lower cost system to get people in our country for this type of position in labor. I mean, a lot of the current immigration spots are reserved for high-tech types of folks that come in and immigrate to the country versus those that are perhaps able to work in the hospitality sector, the construction sector, the agricultural sector. We just need a more coherent and legal process to get those people here. Unfortunately, and it's said a lot, but it is the truth. It's harder and harder to find American employees who are willing to do some of the jobs that have to be done. Mm-hmm. Get up on a roof in 110-degree weather. It's not something that a lot of kids in high school are saying, I want to do that. But there are a lot of people who are desperate for employment and economic opportunity who are. And, we need to figure out how to get them in our country and help the industry, because that, to me, would be the biggest impact for our industry if that were to happen, because it gets you the numbers quicker. I mean, it's going to take generations to get people conditioned. We're just starting to get families and parents conditioned to say, yeah, my kid doesn't have to go get a 4-year degree. There are 6-figure job opportunities in the construction sector and some other sectors as well. But there are also opportunities from an entrepreneurial standpoint, looking at the entry to get a business started and going. The entrance requirements in the construction sector are so low. And so to get a new business going, learn a trade, learn from a builder or subcontractor, and then go start your own company, because we need more companies in this sector. That's the biggest thing holding us back.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting, the different components that come into it, because we were talking about the labor and the labor shortage and what we can do here. We in the real estate industry, we know we need inventory. We are seeing the homes being built at the higher end, and I can't fault any of the builders for doing that. That's a strategic business decision. Mm-hmm. But we also recognize that we have a need for more first-time homes. They need to be affordable. We need to start getting these renters into homes. From a policy standpoint, you were talking about certain communities that are taking different approaches here. What do we need to see at the policy at the state level and the local level to help eliminate some of these obstacles?
Well, where to start? We have actually, in the last few years, there have been some major new policy tools that have been passed into law that enable a local community to use things like tax increment financing, where you describe a geographic area and say, okay, we're going to capture in the future, we're going to capture a portion of the taxes in that jurisdiction to repay an investment of infrastructure. Historically, those programs have been used to bring in that new manufacturing plant or that new job creator. That tool is now being used for housing. So say if we want to build a workforce housing development with homes from $250,000 to $300,000, let's say, but the market to do the math without any sort of subsidy, let's call it, you couldn't afford to do that for anything less than, say, $400,000 a home. Mm-hmm. TIFs, tax increment financing programs, are being used to say, well, looking at this development, you need $5 million of infrastructure enhancements to get the water and sewer, to get the roads all set up. We're going to pay for that through a TIF. Mm-hmm. So we're going to capitalize that up front, lower the builder-developer's cost, and the builder-developer agrees then to sell homes in that development for a reduced rate, that $250,000, $300,000 target. Mm-hmm. Then that say it's a $5 million TIF that's provided that initial infrastructure investment, that gets paid off over, say, 10, 15 years from the actual taxes, or a portion of the taxes that are collected from the homeowners from their property taxes in that community.
This sounds like a great idea. How do we get more communities to do it?
They're actually happening. I mean, they are. They have happened. Sparta, I'm trying to think, there's been several communities that have done that. And I think you'll see more and more. The legislature passed a law that allows communities to do payment in lieu of taxes types of approaches so that they aren't, under law prior to that, they couldn't give a builder or developer a lower payment because they would be viewed as being, showing preferential treatment to one private sector individual or company. Communities can now do that. They can now say, well, instead of imposing this fee that's been our historic fee, we're going to lower that as part of a development deal so that if you're willing to agree to build at these price points that people can afford.
Problem solvers. Like it.
So, and there's other ideas that are percolating. I mean, one that I'm anxious to talk to my counterpart over in the Realtor Association about is, how can we get more people? Could we create some sort of incentive program to get people that are stuck in those 2 or 3% mortgages, who are empty nesters, or who want to sell that, would like to get into a smaller home, perhaps that fits their needs as they reach their senior citizen years and need more accessibility and so forth. How can we encourage them to sell their homes? And so the thought was to create some sort of incentive program for them to do so to a first-time home buyer. So if they sell to a first-time home buyer, they would benefit in some way, whether it's keeping that interest rate for the new home that they buy with maybe some state involvement through MISHDA or some other program. We need to be thinking about that, because that would, getting people out of their existing homes is really important for the realtor community, because it creates more inventory, more demand, more activity. And we need to be looking at policy proposals like that. We also, zoning related issues. There's going to be a package of bills introduced by Representative Christian Grant next week dealing with density issues, parking issues. A lot of communities have parking rules in their zoning that really prohibits more densely more dense housing developments. So there's a number of measures, but none of those in and of themselves will solve the problem. And I do think, though, we want to be able to give more and more tools to local leaders who can work with their builder and development community and other economic development groups to put a plan together for their community. They need more tools to make those price points more affordable.
Well, and I really appreciate that part of the conversation, because we've seen many communities do great things with economic plans to help manufacturing and help industry. But you need to have the workforce, and you need to have the workforce that's able to commute and still have quality of life. To see some of those effective policies applied to housing seems really optimistic.
Yes. And I do think that's what it's going to take. And there are some communities who are just going to say, we want to stay how we are. And you know what? Local control, we understand. But at the same time, too, we have some state programs that should probably be modified. Giving a local community some dollars from the state level to support the attraction of, say, a new company into their community shouldn't be done if that community has housing policies that don't allow for the kind of affordable, attainable housing in their community. If they've got restrictive development policies for housing, then they ought not get that economic benefit from the state for that job attraction project that they would like to have. But they want people to come to their community to work. They don't necessarily want those $200,000 townhomes in their community, which they shouldn't be rewarded for a restrictive policy. They can, it's clearly they should have local control and make the decisions that they want for their community. But if they're going to do something that restricts housing, and then they want to put their hand out to get a grant to help recruit the next, some manufacturer or the next Amazon or whatever, that's to us doesn't make good public policy. And so we've been having discussions with the MEDC and others say, hey,
let's look at this holistic picture here.
You got to see the forest for the trees, because otherwise we're never going to solve this housing problem in our state.
I like where you're going with that. Now, I love data, and I love the stories that data can tell. What data points would you recommend that real estate agents pay attention to kind of stay abreast of these trends in the area?
Boy, I do think, for example, the sale price of existing homes, they continue to go up. I think statewide we were up 2% last year. There are differences depending on where you are in the state. Some are way higher. Some have shrunk a little bit. Obviously, that's an indicator. And looking at those values of new homes that are being built. If the only homes that are being built in your community are up in that typical range that I mentioned, 460,000, 500,000 more or more, you probably have an issue in your community that maybe policymakers need to be made aware of, and to create more opportunities for that more attainable housing in your community. So I do think seeing, and that data is available actually on our website. We have a permit report that also provides estimated value of all those permits. So you can track it in every county of our state through our website at hbaofmichigan.com.
Great resource. Thank you for pointing that out to us. Looking ahead, what does the outlook for new home construction look like for Michigan?
Well, this year, our model, which we've been very accurate with our economic model on forecasts over time, that model shows about a 3% reduction in building activity this year. But I'm hoping for the first time in quite a while, we're way off on that.
Yes, please, numbers.
I do actually see the potential to exceed the building activity that we had last year. Obviously, a lot hinges on what happens with interest rates and overall economic growth and activity. And Michigan's unemployment rate's a little bit higher than the national numbers. Tariffs have had an impact on that. There's been some de-escalation on some of that tariff stuff that I think, and things are looking more positive perhaps for job growth this year, even though our model with the current unemployment rate kind of cautions us to say, hey, we're going to probably see a retraction of activity this year. I think that could change based on those economic factors. And plus more and more of our builders are offering some things to lower that monthly cost. The one thing about the production builders, a few of them are big enough to be able to buy down interest rates for their customers. So instead of the market rate of, what is it now, we're right around 6%, they might buy that interest rate down to 5 or less. And then suddenly that opens up a whole larger swath of people who could afford that home. Actually, one of my counterparts that runs the Home Builders Association out on the West Coast in the state of Washington, they're developing a program that I'm watching very closely, which is to create a program that would allow smaller builders to do the same thing for their customers by using a program that's allows them to use some public financing to lower that interest rate, to help buy down that interest rate for their customers, because the typical builder in Michigan can't do that. It's the Pulte's, it's the Toll Brothers, it's the folks that are publicly traded generally that have the resources to do that.
That's so interesting. I will track that down and see if I can see how that works out for them as well. Very, very interesting creative problem solving on that front.
Yes.
Now, in the world of real estate agents and builders, we work adjacent to each other, but sometimes in different tracks. Do you have, from your perspective, do you have any feedback for the realtor population on working closely with builders and how that relationship can be most productive?
Well, I do think engaging, we have a number of realtor members of our association. And vice versa. I know some of our builder developers are members of the Realtors Association. I think that's probably the most important networking opportunity, is to get engaged. We have 16 home builders associations across the state. Get involved, participate in some of their events. I think there historically for some builders, is a reluctance to want to work with realtors, but that's changed. I've seen that
And
in
I
a
think
positive way.
that also depends on supply and demand and what's
Yes.
happening in the market and where the buyers
Yes.
are coming from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would be my number one recommendation is get engaged with our association and vice versa, I think, and encourage builders to become part of the Realtors Association. And because I do think the reality is our industry is still about relationships. Even though we all want to kind of work on our phones and never talk to anybody, nowadays, it seems like it still is, when it comes down to it in our industry, it's a hands-on relationship building kind of industry.
Yes. And I think if we do project forward, if we don't have more of those affordable homes coming up in communities across the state, the very real reality is that buying new homes is going to require a certain amount of renovation to get there.
Yes.
So I think there will be a increasing amount of conversations and business relationships coming in that direction. We shall see.
Absolutely.
Now, pivoting a bit, how about changes in construction? Are you seeing new technology coming and influencing the plans and the designs, the materials, efficiencies that your builders are bringing to Michigan?
Absolutely. And there's kind of hybrid. I mean, the reality is most homes being built today have kind of a hybrid approach. Pre-produced parts of the house, right? We do have manufactured housing in our state, and there's kind of been an unfair characterization of those types of products in the market. And what people don't realize is some of the technology used in manufactured housing is being used in traditional stick-built housing, where you have a whole component of a house that's already produced in a facility that's shipped to on-site and assembled as part of the overall traditional construction project.
Add
We're seeing
speed.
more of that. In fact, the joke among building officials and inspectors, when they see a perfect wall or a perfect thing, they're like, I bet you that's a component that was produced in a manufacturing facility, or windows that are perfect. Because they're like, when you're putting a window in and it's 20 degrees outside, the work gets done a little quicker, maybe a little less efficiently and effectively. So they often are the first to kind of point out, gee, this house isn't been built the old-fashioned way, the traditional way. You see, 3D printing and other types of opportunities coming. I do think there has to be a mix. We see smaller houses, tiny home developments taking root. There is, I do think the industry historically, though, has been slow to adopt new approaches. But as fewer builders are building more of the homes, and those companies tend to be more sophisticated, we're seeing more adaptation and technology to get those costs down to a point that keep those homes attainable. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to keep that. If we, with all the fluctuations in lumber pricing and whatever the material is, you're going to see more and more diversity in the way in which homes are built and assembled, because it's really assembled and built now at most locations.
Technology can certainly help with scale, which we know.
Yes.
Now, as we wrap up, what does the future hold for new home construction?
Well, the future is bright because I think I mentioned up front that back when the housing industry crashed in 08, 09, we were building 30, 40,000 homes a year. And most economists, as I mentioned, say we should be building 25 to 30,000 homes a year to keep up with normal demand. We've only been building, on average, less than 15,000 homes a year for the last 15 years. So if you look at the shortfall, I know the governor and the Michigan State Housing Development Authority Director, Amy Hovey, used our number, which was kind of interesting, back a few years ago, and said we have 190,000 unit shortage in the state. And really, that's just doing the math on how many homes we've actually produced over the last 15 years versus what an economist would say we need to be building, and that's the shortfall. That gap has shrunk a little bit, but it's going to take years to, and so the demand and the demand has been thwarted right now because of interest rates. The need is still there and is going to be there for the next decade or more. And so I think for the industry, anybody looking to get into the industry, the opportunities are large. Challenges are large too, to get to some of those price points that most people can afford. But the opportunities are there, and those that innovate and are able to keep costs down are going to thrive in the industry. So I'm very optimistic and upbeat about the future of our industry, probably more than I have been in several years. Because when we started sounding the alarm about the crisis we had in housing, we actually sounded that alarm in 2016, 2017, and nobody was paying attention. I think everybody's paying attention now. And that, the first challenge in solving any crisis from a policy perspective is generating an awareness of the problem. And I'm happy to say that politicians on both sides of the aisle understand the problem, are aware of the problem. They may not know all the solutions. None of us know all the solutions, and it's going to take a collective group of actions from across the political spectrum to solve our problems. And then the good news is all those folks, I think, do understand that they need to address the problem, and they are starting to do so. So I'm upbeat. Very upbeat.
I'm glad to hear that. And I'm honestly thankful to have this conversation and to be able to talk through this, because in the industry, all of our practitioners can look at this and we see the crisis where other people were able just to continue with their lives and not appreciate it. But it will be a cultural shift, and the ramifications of it aren't going to be positive. So finding creative solutions, acknowledging that there might be opportunities to change policy, there might be opportunities to come up with economic incentives to make this feasible, can help. And it doesn't start until we have the conversations, until we all stop what we're doing. Our real estate agents stop from selling and just saying, this is a problem. We don't have enough inventory to see what we can do to work with communities and solve the problem.
Absolutely.
In a big way.
We all have to row in the same direction for a while.
Yes, certainly. Yes. Well, Bob, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. This has been a fascinating conversation. I hope that all of you that have joined us have also enjoyed this. If you would love to learn more, you can certainly check out the Home Builders Association of Michigan and all of the amazing resources that are available there. And please be sure to subscribe and let your counterparts know that we are having these conversations, because the more we can share with you, the more you can have conversations, the more you can help guide your business in a direction that'll be very positive for all of your sellers, all of your buyers, and the broader community. So thank you for joining the Recharge podcast, and we will see you next time.